The Incredible Hulk will not be presented this evening.
Coming February 21st, it's Faye and the Moon, the latest graphic novel from Franco and the Saturn Sisters. Faye, mourning for her missing mother, sits night after night below the moon that her mother loved dearly. One night she discovers she can pluck the moon out of the star-filled sky. Back safe in her house, she holds it close, feeling comfort at last. Then Faye loses the moon and finds that taking it has awakened ancient monsters, rats, dragons, and more, who hunt for it for themselves. Will Faye be able to reclaim the moon, find her own inner strength, and save the world from eternal darkness? Faye and the Moon comes from the minds of Franco, whose works include Tiny Titans, Superman of Smallville, Archimaniacs, Itty Bitty Hellboy, and The Ghost and the Owl, and art from the Saturn Sisters, whose animated works include Sesame Studios' The New Neighbors, Hulu's The Awesomes by Seth Meyers, and PBS's Mira, Selkie from the Sea. Pre-order Faye and the Moon now. Available in bookstores and comic shops everywhere, February 21st.
This portrait of Jean Grey, the Phoenix, is one of the ones I did for a series of single frame mock-up kind of covers for the Marvelocity book, where my concept was it would work like an accordion. When you open up the book, getting past the initial Captain America cover, you would fold it out and you get Iron Man and character after character after character, and it allowed me then to do multiple Marvel character portraits. Phoenix being one of the most primary Marvel concepts, because her storyline back in 1980, the invention of that character, that maturation of Jean Grey into the Phoenix, was one of the best storylines in the history of comics and stands out as one of the most important female superheroes.
Welcome back, everybody. Time again for Word Balloon, the comic book conversation show. John Suntress here. Always happy to welcome Rodney Barnes back to Word Balloon. It's good to see you, Rodney. Thank you.
Hey, it's good to see you too. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure, man. Well, as I was telling you off the air, you're killing it with the books you're putting out. I mean, of course, we all know and love Philadelphia, which continues to make us smile, but also beautiful art from, Jason Sean Alexander, and a great story. And, the founding fathers have turned against us and are a cadre of vampires. It's a great story.
They mean well. They mean well.
That's outstanding. But really, man, the biggest excitement coming at the end of January has been your reboot, if you will, a soft reboot of Blacula, a continuation of the story.
Yeah, a continuation of the first movie, sort of. I won't say I dismissed the second movie, but it sort of picks up right after the events of the first movie, 50 years later.
How do you say his African king name?
Prince Mamawaldi.
Oh, pardon me, Prince Mamawaldi. Very
cool. He never made it to the king stage yet. Count Dracula thwarted that. Spoiler alert. But yeah, Prince Mamawaldi.
You can watch the first two movies. Well, the only two movies. Blacula and Scream, Blacula, Scream. They're both on Amazon Prime currently. And Rodney, I noticed at the back of the book, you've got the MGM logo on there as well. Obviously, I'm assuming they own the rights. Is that a fair guess?
They do. I licensed the rights for 5 years, and hopefully we'll do 3 volumes of a story that is really, really close to me. And the one we're talking about now, being the first, but I hope to be able to resurrect, no pun intended, a couple of 70s iconic characters to put into the world of Count Blacula. So there you go.
Interesting. And kind of dovetail them into the Blacula universe.
Yeah, into this it's sort of like Batman in a way. You know how every Batman movie series sort of has its own mythology, even though it takes place in a shared DC universe, but hopefully I can create a Blacula in the universe that sort of stands on its own in the literary world.
Now, the great thing about the Blacula book and your intent with it is that he found himself entombed again in '73 and had
Yeah,
to go through some heavy shit before he's back in the modern world. But that's
yeah,
great that it is this continuation of the story rather than taking it back to the beginning and everything, because there's a lot of good stuff in that first movie. And I won't
yeah,
deny a love for the second movie because it got more comic booky, and
yeah.
also that he became more of an anti-hero, I think, in the second film.
He did, and I think I play on some of that idea in the book. I just when I first saw the movie, it had such a profound effect on me because up until that point, I'd loved the Hammer films, Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing and the Universal monsters and all of that, but I never saw any black people in it.
Yeah.
And every once in a while, we might pop up and say, he went that away, but there wasn't really, as far as the narrative was concerned.
No.
And I love those movies, love, love, love them. So when I found out as a wee child that this was going to happen, Blacula, and back then trailers weren't like trailers now. Like now, when you see a trailer, it gives you like a quarter of the movie. Back then, I just saw it was a black vampire with some fangs, and he had a cape, and he was running around biting people, and that was enough for me. And my mother took me to see it, and it was an interactive experience. It was that one where people talk back to the screen, but it was okay. I didn't mind because we were all having a shared experience of something you didn't typically see. And William Marshall, who played Prince Mamawaldi, aka Blacula, he took the role so seriously that it was sort of a play on Bela Lugosi. Bela Lugosi played an elegant Count Dracula, and in the Bram Stoker tradition, and I think that heavily influenced how William Marshall played Prince Mamawaldi. And so I always had a respect for the character, even though a lot of, as I got older, I saw some of the problematic elements of blaxploitation, but I felt like there was enough meat on the bone that I could extricate the parts that were kind of limited to the budget and those things and
Yes.
the time that it was made, and sort of, updated in a way that still felt like I was creating an homage to the character with respect and dignity, but bringing him into a modern day where he would have some purpose. So that was the goal.
I'm an old movie fan, and we're around the same age. So I was a little
Mhm.
kid when Blacula and some of these other blaxploitation movies were coming out, and I love re-examining them for the very reasons you say. What they were able to accomplish on those low budgets, on the just their ideas, and also reflecting the times in a very interesting way. And as you say, William Marshall, my God, what gravitas! I mean,
Yeah,
you were saying off the air, Shakespearean actor, rightfully so. And I mean, God, I being a Trek nerd, I
yeah,
love him as Dr. Daystrom in
yeah,
M5, the ultimate
yes,
computer from the original series, and
yes,
such a memorable character that even in the modern Star Trek, we have the Daystrom Institute, so still
yes, we
honored.
do.
So,
Yeah.
and that isn't that interesting? That's almost, I love the idea. And forgive me, I'm going to probably say it wrong. Afrofuturism,
Mhm.
great example of Afrofuturism going back to the '60s.
Big time. And I mean, I think, one of the hallmarks of Star Trek and Gene Roddenberry and all of those great stories was that they were incredibly progressive, a lot like Twilight Zone. Had a similar idea of where we were pushing the envelope on what television and film were doing at the time into a more modern era that I think helped move the needle in a lot of ways and how these stories are told and with a degree of dignity and respect.
Agreed. I mean to ask because I was going to go this way anyway. When you mentioned that you're going to be introducing other blaxploitation characters into the Blacula universe, um, is that a tough tightrope to walk, to take the good parts of what that stuff
Um,
was and kind of ditch the problematic stuff now?
it's not difficult if you it's according to how you revere the characters. Like, John Shaft in today's iteration is more of a comedy, not so much the hard-boiled character that Gordon Parks and Ernest Tideman and those guys set forth in the original movie
Yes, sir.
and the other movies that followed. And I I grew up on the hard-boiled guy. And if there is a way, if you don't get too married to the campy idea of it, and you're able to try to find what's under the character, and what's under the character is, a certain passion and an idea of, if you get past the afros and the fashion and the vernacular and all of that stuff, and you get to the heart of what the character wants, I think that there's a way to create a bridge to where that original thing that inspired me, and I'm sure millions of other people, if you keep the essence of that thing in there, you can do it in a way that is an homage. I think if you're looking at it and you're looking at blaxploitation as a campy thing that was just for fun, then you get that too, and then you're sort of you're relegating it to that box. But I think when you think of those actors, and a lot of times great actors, the Yaphet Kottos and the Pam
Yes.
Griers and all of these folks, they were breaking ground on a lot of characters that up until this point we hadn't seen before. You had Oscar Micheaux and you had other filmmakers who had done things earlier, but to a really small audience, because film was what it was, more in a regional type way. But in the 70s, it sort of just exploded. You had great soundtracks to sort of make up sometimes for the low budgets. And I think those actors did the best they could with the stuff that they had, and there were times when they made magic, and the best of those ones. And I think I look at the cinematography in Shaft, and I think it's absolutely beautiful, and especially to Isaac Hayes' great soundtrack.
Yeah.
And so, if I'm able to emotionally connect myself to those parts, I can write to a place where it's still fun, but still not to a place where it's so tongue-in-cheek that you don't take it seriously. You're doing like a Mad Magazine lampoon-ish type thing, where you're telling a story that's very much connected to the period of time that it was in. But I think if you look at what was under blaxploitation as well, there was a subversive feel. There was you could feel the civil rights / Pan-African movement. You can feel that there was this revolutionary idea that the filmmakers were trying to connect into. If you look at today's world, we have some of the same issues and things that we're wrestling with. And I think that if you're able to connect those dots in a way that is respectful, you can still make whatever statement within the narrative you're trying to without making it medicine.
Now I know, and again, you've made enough comics that it's comic books first. But that said, is getting into Blacula, is this a proof of concept you would like to explore in TV or film?
Yeah, yes, there's another project with Blacula involved with a good friend, Dion Taylor, who's trying to get his. We've discussed the idea, and his is a little different than mine. So I would love to do something that doesn't disrespect what he's trying to do, and something that may be more geared for television, or something that's in a different medium, or who knows what will happen down the road. But at the core of it, it's still just a labor of love. I have this weird thing where I'm still connected to a lot of stuff that I loved as a kid. So I recreate them for myself. And, I always looked at comics respecting the medium for being what they are. I put all my heart and soul into those, and whatever happens with them, outside of them being comics, if they go to other media, fantastic. But that's not always the initial purpose. It's like, wouldn't it be cool if, and I sit here and I become like a big kid, and I'm like, if I could just come up with a story, and here we are.
Well, again, Blacula is out now, and you're even doing I noticed a signing coming up next week.
I am, yes. Malik Books on the 23rd. I think it's 7:00 in Culver City. I've been doing a lot of signings lately. I've been all over the place. With my books and these different things. I never saw myself as ever being that guy, but now I'm writing a novel as well. So
that's great.
Yeah, so it's a lot more the literary author stuff. Hopefully, as I become an even older man, I'll be able to continue to, and I don't want to wake up at 5 a.m. to be on a TV or a movie set. Then maybe I'll be able to sit behind a desk and do my Stephen King thing. Who knows?
Well, you've put your hours in, I know, in TV and film. That said, don't worry, Rodney. Like I said, we're about the same age. I keep saying it's not that we're old; we're just not young anymore. And that's
this is true.
And again, you're proving that who cares what the age is and everything, man. You're so prolific right now. And I want to mention a book that's coming out in a couple of weeks, and that's Monarch.
We came out Wednesday. Yeah,
Oh, I beg your pardon. All right, I'm getting my dates mixed up. But
it's
yes,
good.
So please tell us about Monarch.
Yeah, Monarch, another one of those ideas where, if you were to take War of the Worlds, and I love both of them, the Tom Cruise one and the one from the 50s, and you were to place it in a unique setting, in a unique set of circumstances, sort of like a middle school in the middle of a day, if an alien attack happened, how would the kids survive? And would those kids survive without the help of adults and with their own wits? And with, it's not a YA book. The Alex Lynn, the artist of the book, does a great job at showing us that this is something to be taken seriously, but it also has kids in it too. So, that sometimes when you see kids on the cover, you go, oh, this is a kid's book. It's, late teens, I think you begin to get in there. Even though when I was a kid, I saw a lot of stuff I probably shouldn't have seen. Hell, I saw The Exorcist when I was like 9 years old. I just walked in the theater, but I was 6'1" too, so that helped. But yeah, it was, I like to explore different genres and take human stories and put them into different settings and see what happens.
Understood. Were you really that tall?
I was a tall kid. I was a tall kid, and I go back and forth sometimes with my friends. I wondered, did they just not care at the movie theater? Because going to the movies was a different experience. Like, I remember going to the movies before there was a mall to go to the movies to.
Amen.
And
yes.
You could walk in, and there was just like the person that was at the ticket counter, and you got your ticket, and you just walked in, and there might be a machine that had popcorn in it. There might be a human being there, but I could sit in the movie theater all day, and nobody bothered me, and there was a Circle Theater in Annapolis, Maryland, my hometown. And in the mornings, you would have like Flubber and That Darn Cat and, those movies. And then this weird thing would happen midday where it would become John Carpenter movies and Chuck Norris movies. And I saw a bunch of movies I probably shouldn't have seen that I absolutely love, and I'm glad that I wouldn't trade that experience for anything in the world. But a lot of the pop movie, the stuff that has become classics, I just didn't go home. And I happened to see them. I didn't even know they were coming out, like Chuck Norris and Eye for an Eye. Nobody went out of their way, to see those movies, but I saw those movies, The Octagon.
Yes.
And
Force of One.
Yeah, Force of One. Love Force of One. Force of One. The guy, forget his name, that was in the Force of One. He was in Omega Man. He directed one of my Everybody Hates Chris's. I don't remember his name as soon as we get off of here. But he played the kid that was running behind Chuck Norris that Sparky eventually got. I shouldn't remember that. But just a lot of those movies, like I saw the entire early John Carpenter catalog just by staying in movies longer than I should have. The Computer that Wore Tennis Shoes. I can do this all day.
Kurt Russell, absolutely.
Yeah, early Kurt Russell. Early Kurt Russell to later mid Kurt Russell. Big Trouble in Little China Kurt Russell.
Vastly underrated actor. I so agree with you, man. And every now and then, like the fact that Dark Blue sat on a shelf for a couple of years before they finally put it out, or even what he did in Grindhouse. Death Proof. It's like Kurt Russell. And of course, Guardians of the Galaxy too. He's amazing. Man, he really is.
I wanted to be Kurt Russell for a while. It's like after he left the Disney thing, and because those movies, and it's funny because they were from different eras, but with the Disney movies, they kept coming back.
Yes.
So it would be like every year, once a year, these same movies would pop back up, like those Flubber and Son of Flubber and those Fred McMurray movies.
Dexter Riley was his character, yeah.
They kept coming back, and I would just go and see him. But privately, or I guess surreptitiously, was just going to see him so I could see the adult movies that were coming later that night. And all I had to do, you give me $5 back then, I could survive through a whole day of the movies, a Saturday in the movie theater. Come in the morning and leave when it's dark. and just had to walk home because there was no parental supervision. There was no cell phones. Where are you? Come in, and that thing. But yeah, I saw all of those movies, and they sort of framed my imagination and helped me do this thing that I do now.
I so hear you, man. That's great. I'm so glad that a streaming service exists like Brown Sugar, which does a
Yeah,
lot of great.
I belong to the Brown Sugar.
As do I.
I've watched a lot of those. Anytime I want a JD's Revenge experience, and and it's funny, I work with Glenn Turman on American Gods, and we sat at lunch and talked about Cooley High and all of those movies, and it was just a great time. It was so simple. It's weird, this movies seem to be so commercial now. They're built in with this idea they're targeted towards a demo, and back then they just seemed to make movies. And Grease Lightning and just all of these movies that just sort of were made and could get made. I remember Car Wash for the first time, and I loved Car Wash.
Oh my God.
And it was just a day in the life of guys who worked at the car wash. There was no purpose behind it. There was no, there was a little bit of a plot, Abdullah, spoiler alert, Abdullah tries to steal the money. But I don't think anybody's going to get mad at me because I give away what Bill Duke did in Car Wash. But love those movies. It was just a day in the life of. And the Clint Eastwood movies, the Dirty Harry movies, all of those movies I saw as a child. And Convoy.
Convoy, yes.
Yeah, it's like we could do that. We could just sit here. We could talk about.
I know. I'm sorry, man.
And no, this is great, and I'm having the time of my life.
Good.
No one else knows what I'm talking about. If I say that, if I go talk to my kids and say, "Hey, let's sit down and watch Convoy tonight," they're going to get mad at me. And so I talk to you, and we have this private conversation, just the two of us.
There you go, man. No, Reggie Hudlin was on a year or two ago, maybe a little longer, but we were talking about how much we loved, and I'm sure you're the same way. We love Bruce Lee movies because, again, Reggie's like our age, and really, man, it's like he was just cool, and truly the and now I'm blanking all of a sudden, the great Black Kung Fu movies and
Jim Kelly.
Jim Kelly, thank you.
Yeah, when Jim Kelly came in, I still have gotten into many debates about John Saxon and why John Saxon was in that movie and not Chuck Norris. But that would have made. But I was told that you needed that American square jaw of John Saxon to offset. He was cool. I'm not saying he wasn't cool, but he wasn't like. It was clear he wasn't a karate guy in the same way that Jim Kelly and Bruce Lee were. They had a different kind of flair in the way Jim Kelly's perfect afro. And, like, man, you come straight out of a comic book. And it was like perfect. I mean, all of those movies.
Was Jim Connection. Kelly, was he Black Belt Jones?
Man, I believe he was, but don't hold me to it.
Yeah, I'm hip. No, I get it. Yeah. I got to do
but the Three the Hard Way.
Sure.
And just all of those movies were sort of like just movies. And I had this conversation with Patton Oswalt once, and we were talking about comic books and how comic books used to be like disposable entertainment. They weren't meant to really be collected or kept per se, that they were just, you spend 20 cents and it was an experience that was a larger experience of what reading funnies in the newspaper was. It was this thing that you could go and get. And I don't think anybody thought that 40, 50 years later, they'd be $4 or $5 a piece and only 40-year-olds would be able to afford them. And, it's when I talk to kids sometimes and, I'm talking about a book that's coming out because I still have this connection to reading and all of that literacy programs.
Yes.
A lot of kids don't know what a comic book is. They think a comic book are the TV shows because they think comic book show, superhero, but they don't know what it is to hold a comic book and to have to wait until it comes out on a spinner rack. And there wasn't like it's every Wednesday, like I'm programmed now for every Wednesday. There wasn't that experience back then. They just showed different comic books one day, would show up on a spinner rack. And maybe you got the issue that was the next issue, or maybe you got the one that was 2 issues later. and you had to find some way. One of your friends hopefully had it, and from the liquor store or convenience store they got theirs. And it was something about it, the nostalgia that went with the amount of effort that you had to go through to get these things, that sort of played into the love of the hobby and the thing. And now, now I can go on eBay and get damn near anything I want, and just push a button, and in 2 days that book will come. I can get Legion of Superheroes 200, which was impossible to get back in the day, and was a special issue. They didn't print as many, or something happened. It was the marriage of Bouncing Boy and somebody less.
Triplicate Girl.
Yeah, and I bought it now, and it was the biggest deal in the world because I had 199 and 201 for like 20 years and couldn't find 200. It was this mystery thing I wondered if it even happened. And once I got it, now I got like 30 copies. And I only buy them now when I see them because I couldn't get it when I was 10. So, that's sort of my life now. But,
and I hear you, man. That's so funny. When Superman Lois came out, the TV show, and they had the two sons, I was reminded of that great Silver Age story it was an imaginary story of one kid having powers and one kid not. Yeah. And I read it in an 80-page giant, and I looked on eBay, and sure enough, I found the actual, copy, and it was like $10. I got a reader copy. I didn't need it to be pristine. I just wanted to read it again. But I hear what you're saying.
If you think I'm lying, this is what I bought today.
There you go. Show it again.
I said, if you think I'm lying, this is what I bought today when I went to the comic shop.
The best, man.
Yeah, and it's like, I bought the new stuff too, but I will buy things when I see them because it's the wall. I go to Earth 2 on Ventura Boulevard in Sherman Oaks. Shout out to Carr.
Is Jeff Johns still involved with Earth 2?
I don't know if Jeff Johns is, but
because he used to be. But okay.
Yeah, okay, and see, there you go, some trivia. But all the Golden Age stuff, I'm there now in my mind. This is what you do when you're old. You recreate it with your hands like a puppet show. Okay. And on the wall are all the Golden Age, Silver Age, Bronze Age stuff. I go to that wall before I go to the new stuff.
I'm hip.
And I will buy, I bought a copy today of The Cult. You know how many copies of The Cult I have? Bernie Wrightson and Jim Starlin, or the other way around. Million copies out in the garage somewhere, at every form. The original one that came out, different collections, hardcover, soft cover. But I saw it and I had to buy it because I'm connected to that part of me that's a child that's still not healed. So I buy comic books to soothe myself. It's better than cheeseburgers.
Amen. During the lockdown, my go-to for that stuff, I rediscovered my love for Hot Wheels, and I'm not looking for
man. The snake, there was the mongoose and the snake, the yellow one and the red one. And they had the loop.
Yes.
And then Sizzlers came out.
Sizzlers.
My thing to the side for a minute because Sizzlers could go by themselves in a loop.
Yes.
And that was the greatest thing in the world.
Amen. Absolutely, man. That's fantastic. I've been buying, I was a big Corgi guy. I don't know if you had any Corgis and stuff back in the day.
Not so much. It's like I got to a point where I went through a serious G.I. Joe phase where you could pull, you could pull, hit the deck, that one. And then all of a sudden I started getting friends around 12 or 13. It's like, hey man, you need to put that away. So I would just do it in the room like I was ashamed. And I would have these little wars between my Evel Knievel and $6 Million Man doll. And then I would have them fight my G.I. Joes in these fake wars. And they were all, it's very testosterone driven.
Yeah, absolutely.
I had no Barbies. And we hadn't gotten to that place in history yet for the world that I came up in. And so it would be like these fantasy Apocalypse Now styled, just massacres that had to happen every weekend when I was by myself in a room. And I still, if you leave me alone long enough around toys, I probably would still do it. Probably.
I'm hip. I get it, man. That's fantastic. All right, let's move on to more books. Good Lord. This is great, Rodney. Seriously, I love that we're talking about this stuff. Here, let's talk about Nightmare for a second.
Yeah, Nita Hawes Nightmare blog. I guess my loosely based homage to Kolchak, the Night Stalker, paranormal investigator who is connected to Philadelphia. She's a paranormal investigator and also a professor of paranormal studies at Morgan State University in Baltimore. And, there's a book called Legion by William Peter Blatty that was the unofficial sequel to The Exorcist.
Yes.
And Exorcist 3 with George C. Scott. I was a production assistant on that movie.
Wow.
And I always loved the idea of, it's one of my favorite movies, even though a lot of people are hard on the Exorcist sequels because of 2 being what it was. That I love the idea of the Gemini killer, and that basically that demon got into, spoiler alert again, that demon got into someone and became like a killer. Because I always wondered why when people got possessed, they seem to just contort in shapes and jump around. But if you truly are being controlled by this thing that hates humans, why don't you try to kill humans? That was always this thing with me. It's like, Reagan in The Exorcist, her mother just left her alone. She would just stayed in the room and floated around and stuff. She really wasn't a threat until you came. Burke came in the room and got by the window. That's why she pushed him out. Another spoiler alert. It's like if Burke had stayed downstairs or whatever, he'd have been fine. And even if she walked down the steps, she did the crab walk backwards. If you get the director's cut, yeah. I would have known that, something's wrong with this person and I can leave. But if you got into a killer and became a killer, then there's another more serious thing that a detective now has to use his wits. And this isn't just a human serial killer that I'm after. So I always was intrigued by that idea. And so instead of like with Kolchak, where you would have a monster of the week or a monster each issue, I wrote it in a way that each story arc was really one case that she had to deal with, and a lot of demon possession and Jack the Ripper and that type of stuff, always infusing history somehow, some way into the narrative because I love that stuff. But yeah, that was a book. Just finished our second arc last month or the month before. They all kind of blend in together at some point.
Does, gosh, you can't help but see that Jason Sean Alexander a lot of times is your collaborator on all these things. And I mean, my God, with a great painting style, is he working away in advance? How is he able to put all this stuff out?
Sisman Krudansky, I always mess his name up. He does a lot of the work. Now we're starting to branch out with other artists. Jason is also the art director for Zombie Love Studios and Blacula. We just click. And even though we argue like we're married, and I always say in interviews, I profess my contempt for him as a human being. I can't help but love the art thing. It's like the perfect marriage in the sense that, one part of our relationships works really, really well. The other part, we just argue like cats and dogs, and then somebody will send someone like this, hey, you want to go eat tomorrow? And that's our way of saying, I'm sorry. Or at least my way, because he knows I like to eat. But yeah, I love working with Jason. We only live a few miles apart. We met years ago, almost a decade ago, and I was interviewing him for an art book. I don't know why they chose me. I don't know why they chose him. But we like, hey, I don't live too far from you. Let's get together every once in a while and eat food. And we would pitch each other story ideas, and I would hate his ideas and he would hate my ideas. And then one night while he was drinking whiskey, I pitched him Philadelphia, and he said, oh man, that's interesting. I'm thinking it's the whiskey. I'm thinking like, it's not the idea. He's just drunk. And I dismissed it. And the next morning he called and he said, hey man, that thing, the vampire thing, have you put it on paper? Like, and I said, no, but I can. And so that sort of was the beginning of the journey. And, he helped get it to Image because he was working on Spawn. So he had that relationship there to open the door. And they've been great partners in getting the book out there and getting it in people's hands. And then to Nita Hawes, the spinoff, and then now Monarch. And hopefully we'll be able to make some more books as we go on. But yeah, Image is great. I guess I have to say it. Jason is great. Don't hold me to it. I hope this is the part you can go back. You know how at
Oh,
the
it is
end
this
when
part.
you
Don't worry.
say, yeah, just wipe that part out. Yeah, but no, this has been a great collaboration. And Jason, in a lot of ways, because I come from TV more than anything else, has actually been a great mentor into the culture of comics. I mean, there were a lot of things. A lot of guys put out books that are TV writers or whatever, but Jason started the thing with the variant covers with McFarlane, Scotty Young. Those are all relationships that he had made over time. And I knew nothing of any of this because emotionally, most of my comic reading happened in the 80s and 90s. And so comics go through this cultural shift. And I learned about that on Falcon, that, there's this thing, I don't know if you've heard about it, called Twitter. And
A little bit.
when people don't like what you do, they have an ability now to tell you, there you go, to tell you how much they don't like what you're doing, and you read it. So I like living in a bubble where I think everyone just loves what it is that I do. And if you don't, I can just sort of tune it out. But now, if someone doesn't like, they can go, oh my God, this is the worst thing ever. Why didn't somebody shoot this guy? He's horrible. And I'm like, hey, wait a minute, it's a comic book. But but also it helped sort of evolve my sensibilities from where I last was to where I had to be if I was going to stay in this thing. And, just get used to dealing with, but I have to say 95 to 97% of it has been all love and supportive and an incredible community that I'm proud to be a part of and committed to it, because you don't make comics to get rich. You make comics to make comics because you love them.
I hear you, man. And no, honestly, so was Falcon your first series?
Falcon was my first series. I was working on the TV show Runaways from Marvel, and they liked what I was doing. And I don't know how the conversation came up, but I think Jeff Lowe, being my boss, probably had something to do with it. But I sort of made it clear that if any of the nice folks in Marvel TV could ever connect with the nice folks of Marvel Publishing and let them know that I'd be interested in just doing a book, I would be, I'd really appreciate it. And I got a call and they said it was an open assignment for Falcon. And so I jumped on it. But I learned quickly that there is a difference. My first 2 or 3 scripts, which were the rockiest ones for me, I was writing for TV. I was not accustomed to writing for art, stationary art. And I had to learn to say more with less. That was the biggest hurdle to get over. I remember my editor at the time said, he read the script. He said, it's ponderous. And I'm like, I know what ponderous means. That's not the word.
That's not a compliment.
I want to hear like love. I want to hear this is the greatest thing. Like Hemingway is crying someplace because he loves these words. That's not what I got. And so I didn't understand until I got that first, when you get your art back with the lettering in it. I got it. You almost wanted to move the words out of the way so that you could see the art. And I came up on those Alan Moore books, and those books where it was a lot of words, and like Miracle Man, Neil Gaiman, a lot of words.
Yes,
very prosy.
Yep.
And so you pick up a book today, it might not have any words. Just whatever's on the cover and just action, 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 then a few words, then action, action, action. And so I had to find my voice in comics, and I had to figure out how to sort of navigate my way through books. And it took, between Falcon, Quincredible, Lando, Double or Nothing, I had to get through those books and figure out what my voice is in comics and a process. And by the time I got to Philadelphia, I sort of said, okay, this is the thing that I understand, and I want to do it like this. And I've been doing it like that ever since.
That's great. The reason why I'm leaving Falcon up there is I just read it on Marvel Unlimited. I love the idea of Sam Wilson mentoring Josiah, the Patriot, Isaiah Bradley's grandson. And that is so great because it does keep that Cap lineage going. And now through that, in a lot of ways, obviously, because he was really a neighborhood hero, and then teaming up with Cap was sort of his mentor. And now Sam could pass it along to Josiah.
And all of that. And in order to be able to do that, he had to figure out himself along the way. It's like he's had so many different iterations of who Sam Wilson is, whether it was as Captain America or Snap, the gang member, or so many, or as just the sidekick idea for a while, and then that evolved over time into something
Absolutely.
more substantive. And so it was like, okay, I wanted to do a story about who am I? Who exactly am I? And I took him to hell, and I had him fighting vampires, and I had him doing stuff some of the fans were like, he's just a soldier. He's a soldier. And I'm like, yeah, I get it. But, I want to try to take a shot at doing something different. And you can hate me if you want to, but this is what I'm going to try to do.
No, absolutely not. I don't know who this person is, Gail Simone.
Hey, I know Gail Simone. How you doing, Gail? Gail's been very supportive of Rodney Barnes, and I appreciate it. I miss you, Gail.
I miss you too, Gail.
I do. Gail, when I was doing Quincredible, was incredibly supportive at a time when I needed that support. I love Gail Simone, and I wish I was able to work with Gail Simone more. Gail is incredible.
I'm a big fan as well. I'm going to guilt her now into coming back on Word Balloon sooner than later.
See, after that, she's got to come. You have no choice now. You have no choice. Gail's got to come on.
All right, you heard it from Rodney. Come on, Gail. Yeah, Quincredible. Let's talk about Quincredible for a second. I'm glad you mentioned it.
Yeah, I mean, Quinn was the first time that I sort of tried to put myself into a story for comics where up until then, they were assignments. I was doing assignments. I was trying to write a good, in quotes, comic book. And I thought about my TV work that I'm proudest of is stuff where I saw myself in the story. So when Lionforge came to me and said, would you be interested in writing about this kid who's indestructible, but that's all he's got. And he's surrounded by in a world where there are a lot of different heroes, and he really wishes he could be one of them, the cool ones that could fly and do sexy stuff. All he can really do is get run over by a bus and survive. And so my thought was, it sort of played into the idea of growing up, that you don't see your gifts or the value in your gifts because you're too busy thinking about what other kids think of you and your insecurities and trying to figure out your identity, who you are as a person. And you add the cultural stuff in, and growing up in the area of New Orleans where, struggling a little bit and has dealt with a couple of natural disasters, that you're wrestling with that too. And, so many different things that when you get this gift, you can't see it as a gift because you're too busy looking at the parts of yourself that you're not comfortable with. So my idea for writing, and because I had similar things too, I was a big kid, but inside I'm a child. Still, there are people who say I'm like a child. But the evolution of Quinn as a young man, that as he gets better as a person, or he grows, he becomes more comfortable with himself, the better hero he becomes. And I've looked at myself in that way and said, as a writer and as a human being, the better I've become, the more I require of myself. And the less I listen to my insecurities and give in to those lower fears and all of that stuff, the better I get at virtually every aspect of my life. It doesn't necessarily become easier, but I deal with it better as it goes, if that makes sense. And so I wanted to infuse that in Quinn and sort of humanize the story. He's got perfect parents. He doesn't just have the mom that's made of gold and she just wishes she could give her son more. She's got a great dad. He's got a great mom. He's got a great family and a great base and people in his neighborhood who love him. But really, he's wrestling with him and the occasional antagonist that pops up from out of nowhere for him to deal with. But I love the story. We did a volume 3. I think there's going to be a volume 3 coming out next year.
Great.
And really, really dug it and owe Quinn a lot in that experience at Lionforge. It just, I think with anything, the more you get an opportunity to do it, the better at it if you become, just by the repetition and becoming more comfortable with doing the thing. And that's what I needed more than anything else.
Excellent. Gail says it's her favorite Lionforge book.
I appreciate it. She helped tremendously on that. She won't give herself any credit on that, but those emails and that advice and all of the stuff along the way and helping me made me feel better because I respected her from the beginning. And just the way, a lot of times with editors, they can give you notes and things, but there's a sentiment sometimes within it that's encouraging. And the more encouragement, certainly to someone, I had written for a long time, but I hadn't written comics for a long time. And I needed that encouragement. I needed that, that thing. And if I had to go back and write 2 drafts or 3 drafts, it'd be pushed a little bit more. Within the push was the education. And that's the thing that's invaluable and almost worth whatever the check is, to be able to just get better at doing. That's all I ever wanted, was to be able to get better and better and better. And hopefully I'm moving in that direction. But it was people like Gail who were incredibly,
See, she's saying right now for the audio artist, it's because you're one of the best in the comics, Rodney. Rodney, honestly, man, really for 7 years in the business stuff, I think you're really doing great stuff, and it continues to evolve, all your product and everything. And here's some other nice things that people are saying about you, man.
I appreciate it. Now, see, what's going to happen is I'm going to thank you. I'm going to have to drink water and ride the treadmill tonight and take better care of myself, because my self-esteem is going to rise, and this is going to become an easier ride for me. I like the angst. The angst I'm better at wrestling with. The "you suck" is easier than someone telling me. If you tell me I'm good at something, I'm like, what's going to happen?
No, I hear.
Yes, karma. I start looking around.
Fight you in the ass.
Like, hey, wait a minute now. But like I said, coming from Gail, it was they're these people who just sort of fixtures in the business that know the ups and downs and have just gone through all of it and are able to keep their heads about it. It's a lot of talented people in the business, but being able to deal with that emotional roller coaster of what the business can be is the hardest part. And Gail is just one of those people that really, really matter. And I hope one day to be one of those types of people myself.
It's a crowded shelf, Rodney. There's a lot of competition. You're right. But the good news is I think you keep delivering. And here, even more wonderful comments. Let's see. I want to get them up here. No, but it's good, man. Here, come on. Here, Mark McGrath. Recently got turned on to Philadelphia. Great book. Didn't realize until recently that it was a gateway blog. Now I got to have it.
Hey, man, it's better than some of the gateway drugs. I've had to give up sugar and a bunch of other ones. So, reading a book is always a good one.
I respect that, man. God, we got to talk about Mandalorian.
Yes.
That's been a wonderful run for you. All right, where the hell's the...
I just finished season 2 of The Mandalorian.
Exactly, man.
The weird thing with The Mandalorian is it's not really writing. It's funny. They invited me. Marvel invited me to the Star Wars celebration when they do for the publishing, and Lucasfilm as well. I did a couple of panels, and I had to say the same thing twice. It's not really writing. Favreau and those guys wrote it, but to take what they did and plot it in such a way that it feels like the same experience that you're getting from the TV show into a book that's half of the, if you go by screenplays, you say a minute is a page, and you got to squeeze it into this thing. And Georges Gente, I hope I'm saying his name correctly. He's a great guy. I met him at a con not too long ago, and we still have to have lunch together. He's doing such a fantastic job just being able to pace this thing. And that's what I sort of plotted to. It's the pacing of it and being able to put it in a place where, again, that you want the experience to be one that's satisfying. And so that's what The Mandalorian has been. But I did another story, IG-88, for War of the Bounty Hunters. And, of course, the aforementioned Lando Double or Nothing. And always fun to play in the Star Wars space. I'm thankful. Whenever they email and say, hey, would you like to? I say yes before they even, I still have my Jar Jar Binks Ewok story that nobody will listen to. But my buddy Team Up. But short of that, everything that they've allowed me to do up until this point is incredibly appreciated. I hope I get to continue to do it. It makes me feel like a child, better than my knees do. It makes me feel like an old man.
And you're kind of touching on this, but a patron of mine on Patreon, Ryan O'Connell, wanted to know, could you go into the process behind the adaptation for the Mandalorian Marvel series? For instance, he felt the first issue equaling the first episode structure to him is very interesting.
Well, it's more or less is taking the script, watching the show, and really looking at pacing more than anything else. I tried to pace the page. Like, what are the pertinent aspects of what's happening on screen? that I can translate in such a way, again, to sort of mirror the experience to where you're reading a book, which is a different experience of watching a television show, but the pacing is still there of watching a television show. And to lesser or greater degrees, Mandalorian is one of those things that has like a Western feel. So
Absolutely.
that there's some moments that have to feel like atmospheric and a sense of dread or a sense of you're looking at the tension that you're trying to build. And again, I'm working with half the page count, so half the time, but still having to tell the same amount of stories. So what's left out and what you decide to keep is always like, the big beats, of course, you have to do that plot wise in order to keep it moving. But still, I want to keep it to make it an experience that's a similar experience. That's sort of the mission here. And they let me do season 2, so I'm assuming they were happy with season 1. And Lord willing, I'll be able to do season 3. But it's a fun ride. It's a fun ride.
Is
Also did a short story for Marvel too, a prose story about Mace Windu. I did a Mace Windu
great.
landing on a thing, and I want to do more prosy stuff as time goes on.
I really hope they come back to Mace in some way because we see him fly out of the window.
Exactly. We don't know if Mace is gone. We just knew
man.
he flew out the window. He's a Jedi. They're magical.
Come on, exactly.
They're magical people. They can do anything. If I went out of a window, we know it's the end. But if Mace goes out of a window, who knows?
Amen. I'm with you, man. That's great. Is Sarah Pichelli working with you on Mando, or is it still George?
Still George.
Maybe I saw a cover or something. Maybe I saw a variant.
Yeah, maybe. It's so many. Oh my God, so many variants. I've signed so many different covers that I've never seen. They give me comps of the one that comes across, the newsstand edition, but they have so many different covers.
Oh yeah.
That I'm like, I hope one day as a gift they'll give me like, a copy of each or put them in. I'm sure they'll do a fancy smancy collection of something. But
I would hope so. Yeah.
I'm here. It's doing relatively well, so I hope that happens.
To me, the best part of watching the episodes are at the end when we get those art design painted images that are scenes from the show. And seriously, man, I freeze them. I look at them. I mean, oh, it's so great. And
I buy the books. I buy those design books and making of
Ryan Mindinger, I believe, is the artist. Yeah.
I buy all of those. I buy them for a lot of different movies, but I buy them for Mando mostly because I just admire the assembly. The assembly of how they and the amount of work that they put into it is just incredible. And you have to respect that craft. I respect craft. And I try to apply the same thing to the books and virtually everything I do.
I didn't know you did a James Bond story.
I did do it. I did a run. I did a 6-issue, was it five or six issue of James Bond and Army of Darkness for Dynamite. And shout out to Nick Barucci, who gave me that opportunity. I like to do different stuff. I like to push myself. It's like even when you look at the difference between Monarch and Philadelphia and Nita, I try to see, all right, what can I do differently? How can I touch different boxes in different ways while still putting the emotional content and stuff? And I try. I want to get better.
I guess this trade might be coming out later this year.
They have a trade. They have a hardcover too, I think, that they're doing that was in Amazon that I desperately want. But to date, I haven't been able to snag.
All right, Barucci. Barucci listens to Word Bellini.
That's good.
So
good dude. He's helped me out with a couple of other things and properties and things. Good dude.
That's excellent, man. No, that's so great to hear. Well, before we get to the new TV, are we cool for time, Rodney?
Of course we are.
Okay, excellent, man. I don't want to, I know it's dinner time or whatever, but
Gail
also you're watching.
Gail Simone's watching. I got nothing but time in this world. Who knows who else could be watching? I want to stay on now.
I've subscribed to your Substack, and I saw that you've got a new TV project coming up. But before we get to the new one, will Winning Time, the LA Lakers HBO show, will that continue?
Yeah, we just finished season 2. And we've been in post right now and getting those shaped and prettied up. I think June is when it's supposed to drop. And Maurice, the head of Lakers security, makes appearances again. And so, yeah, it's going to be a season 2.
That's great to hear. Honestly, Rodney, it bummed me out that the Emmys did not acknowledge Winning Time more. I really felt a lot of the performances, not John C. Reilly, Sally Field, but also, and we talked about the last time we talked, I just loved the way you guys had that grainy 70s
Yeah.
camera.
Todd Van Hazel, the great Todd Van Hazel. I think he was nominated for an Emmy.
Maybe he was. I was paying more attention to the starring, nominations and the writing and the
should have been, but I mean, certainly for casting as well, and costumes and set design. I mean, what it takes to go into. Thank you, Peter. What it takes, everything that it takes to make that show. There's so many great people that are a part of that process. That and the support that we get from HBO is incredible as well. And so it's a labor of love, but it's a lot of good people that put a lot of good labor into making that thing come together.
Have you gotten any personal either compliments or grief from some of the Lakers? Of course, Rick Fox was part of the production, and I loved what he did on the after shows. But have you met anybody that wanted to ball up their fist and have a conversation with you?
No, I mean, I think people are always curious about what the process was for a lot of different reasons as to what we did. Did we just make it up? And it's like, no, we didn't. We did extensive research, and virtually everybody wrote a book.
Yes.
So we read all of those books, and there's YouTube and there's magazine articles and all of that. But I always say that if someone was doing the story of Rodney Barnes, and Rodney Barnes wasn't a part of the story of Rodney Barnes, and they picked whatever the things were that were pertinent to them in telling the story. This is the version of your life that I want to tell that story. And it didn't jibe with what I wanted. I would probably feel a way about that. I would probably have a feeling.
Sure.
We were able to talk to Spencer Haywood and some of the other Lakers and who supported what we were doing. And I hope in time, everyone, those guys, see that this is a labor of love and appreciation for them. This isn't like a smear campaign. This isn't trying to desecrate what they accomplished. Those guys are great. I grew up watching those teams. I love the 76ers, and they beat my 76ers a lot. But I appreciated the battle. It was a test of wills, and that was the first time I looked at basketball in that way. Because up until then, basketball was cool. It was something that I watched. It was something that I played horribly. But yeah, it was that. But then when the Larry Bird, Magic Johnson story started to be told, it was like whichever part of the world or sensibilities you came from, it was good versus evil.
Yes.
And, there was a culture shift in Boston being so different than LA. There were racial undertones to it.
Yeah.
There was style of play,
Absolutely.
Bird being more of a traditionalist and Magic with the fancy stuff. And so it became, there was a story now, and there were characters more so than just basketball players. It wasn't just about putting the ball through the hoop. And, being able to tell this story that walks with reality, but isn't necessarily reality in a traditional sense of the word. It's not a documentary. It's an honor. It's fun. It's fun to be able, I've been fortunate in my career to, whether it was the Boondocks, whether it was Everybody Hates Chris or American Gods, these were all Wu-Tang. These are all fun places to sort of tell stories from and actually learn how to do it as I'm going. I sort of backdoored my way into Hollywood. And it required and still requires a consistent amount of an education and firming up skill sets. And I'm still working on it to this day. And it's the thing that makes it intriguing. It's exhausting, but it's intriguing at the same time.
Mentioning the Boondocks, Our Burrow Snakes wants to know how you got into producing the Boondocks.
Writing and producing the Boondocks, the show's creator and I had a mutual friend, and the show was in development, and he put the two of us together, and our sensibilities kind of clicked into what he wanted to do. And I was already working on my wife and kids at the time. So they sort of clicked, and we just started making TV.
That's great. The only conversation I've had about the Boondocks was with Andrea Romano, the voice director.
Oh yeah, Miss Andrea. She was incredible as well. She's incredible, and
I
she's
so agree
doing
with you,
great
man.
work on those DC movies as well.
Well, that's
The voice-
honestly, and the versatility to do something as funny, edgy as Boondocks and as traditional DC.
There's
That's all the
nothing
animated shows, you know.
nothing funnier than watching her direct actors say some of the most profane things ever, and say them with that voice. You know, I can't say the word, but if you can imagine her saying, "No, no, no, no," you got to emphasis. You got to put more on this, and it was just fantastic. I love her. I love her. I
She's
miss her.
great. I during COVID, my friend Susan Eisenberg, Wonder Woman from the Justice League cartoons, she got the whole cast together to do table reads, and it was a big Zoom. Everybody was on it, and Andrea was directing them, and it was great because she really. It was like watching, as you know, as a boxing fan, watching a good sparring session where they're really into it. And she absolutely was like, no, it's got to be stronger. And it was great. And I know the listeners and viewers are like, that's great that she was really going to that level, even in a casual table read, man. No, nothing casual about Andrea.
She's incredible. I really, really, really enjoyed working with her.
That's terrific, man. That's great. Hey, I'm hoping maybe some of these other properties might find their way into animation.
It would be a beautiful thing. I miss animation, you know, and I know a lot of really creative things are being done in animation. And like as the technology continues to evolve, then it opens the door. But it's weird. Animation always seems like it's struggling to find a home. You know, HBO had a moment with animation, and then Adult Swim, and then Netflix, and they seem to move around every couple of years where there's a new home, but it doesn't really have the level of consistency I think it deserves.
Interesting. No, I hear what you're saying. And especially the moves that HBO Max has done lately, in some ways to dismantle some of the newer products. You know, they got Velma right now, obviously Mindy Kaling and everything, and obviously some other things. But yeah, I'm with you. All right, we mentioned boxing and was thrilled to see this on your Substack. Jack Johnson, everybody, coming to HBO Max. And, you know, and forgive me, man, I'm going to let you say the actor's name because I'll probably get it
Mahershala Ali. I got to get a new picture.
Great
I got to get a new picture of me. If you knew what I get, the grief that I get from my friends about that picture, that Alan Amato, of my friend and photographer who took that picture, you know, the superhero thing, like, what are you looking at exactly? What are you off looking at? It's like, I'm contemplating, I'm thinking. This is important. I have a lot of thoughts. That's
the hero. That's the hero pose, Rodney.
It's the hero pose, but the people don't see the hero in it. They see it as almost like, you know, like the Good Humor Man just rolled by. And
that's awesome.
You know, every time it comes out, I get a text from someone because I had this comedy background, comedy writer. And if you ever have friends, make sure you don't have any comedy writer friends because nothing is sacred.
Rodney, go on. I'm sorry.
I'm just saying they don't care about my feelings, but they will talk about my poor picture. Every time there's a new thing, and there's another new thing that's coming within the next week or so, and it's like I know that picture is going to be up there, and I know I'm going to hear something from somebody, and all I'm doing is just looking. I'm just looking.
Come on, man. Yeah, listen, I'm a big guy too, and one of the reasons why I don't think I've finally put out my word balloon book is I would take forever to get a decent author photograph of myself. I'm a big guy too.
It's a struggle, man. I feel It's a struggle.
But let's talk about Jack Johnson. You know, I was here in Chicago. Our public television station was very kind when the Ken Burns Unforgivable Blackness documentary came out about Jack. They had me do a local segment on it for the local PBS station because you know, I spent 16 years writing boxing for Boxing Illustrated, Ring Magazine, and doing.
We talked boxing before last time.
Amen, and we're going to talk about it again right now, Rodney.
Yes,
absolutely.
Yes.
But you know, his time in Chicago and everything was, you know, they really wanted to hear about that. And what an amazing figure! You know, for people might know that he was the first black heavyweight champion, but what a story, and really a very interesting. I mean, the Great White Hope, of course, the great movie with James Earl Jones and the play. But what a great chance to tell Johnson's turn of the century story and all the crap he had to deal with. Good Lord. I mean, you know, there were a lot of terrible, heinous things that were caused in protest of him. being
Yeah,
heavyweight
after every fight, there was a riot. But the weird thing about Jack Johnson, and the thing that intrigued me more than anything else, is he was sort of Muhammad Ali before Muhammad Ali without like backup. We're coming into Reconstruction. We're not that far away from slavery. We're in this transcendent period in the North, primarily in the North, where there's still not a lot of protection, for people like him. And I'm not even just talking about just the black aspect of him, but the way he would be defiant, like unapologetically doing things that sort of poked the established idea of what was acceptable for black people in the eye. And and everything that I've read, everything that I've researched, he was that guy, and just had this personality of just unflappable. And his story, W.E.B. Du Bois and Booker T. Washington and some other prominent figures are also characters in my take on him. And I'm as fascinated with the period of time itself, because typically you see these stories about that focus on race and culture, and they're set in slavery, civil rights movement, somewhere orbiting around those two periods of time. And this was a unique period of time where you had a lot of prominent black folks really making inroads into politics. And Jack sort of was riding that wave in his own grassroots way by beating up a lot of guys who were seen as being unbeatable.
Yes.
And the Jeffries fight, sort of put America on alert that this whole idea of inferiority, if the world caught on to it as a myth, which is just what it was, this could be a problem. And so Birth of a Nation was inspired, I think, by some aspects of that. There's a rumor that King Kong was a part of that.
Wow.
And that these negative images had to be created to sort of push back the idea of this guy who was going in the ring and dominating around the world. It wasn't, when we use the word sometimes world heavyweight champion, it meant a different thing back then. Back then it meant you're going to Australia to fight. You're going into Europe to fight. You're fighting around the world. Now you go to Vegas to fight.
Indeed.
And used to be Atlantic City, and typically you're going to fight American fighters, now European fighters in Ukraine and all of that. But there was a period of time where they threw the kitchen sink at Jack, and Jack was taking all comers and knocking them out for a really long time. And that sort of created this idea of if you're just looking at America and the Western world as the definer of who black men and black people were, there you get this one message, but then you get this defiant figure who is dominating and dispelling all of those myths in front of the world's eyes, to the point where they had to stop making films of his fights, because when it came to the knockout, the idea of a black man knocking out a white man just couldn't be, it wasn't acceptable. That shows you the power of film. That shows you the power of just communication in general. And it's a Herculean task, but Mahershala Ali is an incredible actor and producer, and all of the different folks who are connected to it in their own right are, holding me accountable and making sure that we dot all our I's and cross all of our T's. And I'm excited to get further down the road, and hopefully we can bring it to the light of day.
Well, being a longtime boxing writer and boxing fan of boxing history, it is an incredible story here. Matt Whitaker says, "I love Jack Johnson. It is such a great story. The pictures,
the suits and the hats and the cars and the boots and all of that stuff. I mean, Jack had style and was a dresser. And that was another thing too. He wasn't just talking, like he had a flair. It's like there's this one story where he was driving his car so fast that when the police pulled him over and they charged him the $50 ticket, whatever it was. And he gave him 100 because he said, when I'm coming back, I'm going just as fast too. So we may as well get this out the way now. I can't believe, you're talking to a white man with a gun in 1900, whatever it was.
Exactly, man.
In the middle of nowhere, and I don't have a gun and you do. And I'm just going to look at you and say, and already I have this thing where I'm sure there were people who wanted to kill Jack Johnson, like in the stadium, but to have this defiance, it's just incredible. So it's a lot of story to capture, a lot of detail, a lot of history, and you're only going to get one crack at it. And it's sort of like Winning Time, where when you're telling the story, it becomes part of the canon of who these people were, and you want to do it. You want to do it justice. And I know he was exonerated, Sylvester Stallone, and then went to
Trump
with Deontay Wilder and trying. I don't know if it was Tyson Fury too, but it was Deontay Wilder and Stallone. I think it was someone else too, and they went to Trump and they got him exonerated. And they made laws about this man.
The Mann Act, absolutely.
The Mann Act, and it stayed on the books for a long time after he passed. So it wasn't just about him; it was about the ideas of freedom. What's the idea of what does freedom really mean? And how can we create these boundaries to keep things the way we want them to be? So it's a huge story. It's a huge, huge story. I thank HBO and all the other folks for giving me an opportunity to take a crack at it. And I'm going to do my best and we'll see what happens.
Is it still in writing phase? Is it?
Yeah, I can. If I'm surrounded by Jack Johnson, this is a Jack Johnson album.
Wow.
In French.
Holy cow.
And I've got
I've seen that vaudeville footage of him in his later years doing an exhibition.
That's the Jack Johnson book, and here's Jack Johnson's actual book.
Wow.
And do I have more under here? I think Papa Jack is in my car. But because I take it to lunch with me and I try to get as much stuff in as I can. But, coming up in Galveston, where Juneteenth was a part of the story, where the slaves didn't know that they were free. And born in 1878 and slavery ending in 1865, you're still dealing with the echo of all of that. It's still sort of there. It wasn't like slavery stopped and said, hey, everything's
great. Everybody relax.
Everything's great. It's way, let's all work together. You know what? We need to rethink this thing. Jeez. It wasn't that you still had that in there. To have this prominent figure, these weren't just barroom brawls. These just weren't underground fights. They may have started that way, and that might be a part of the story of the journey. But he was fighting in front of the world. And at that time, boxing wasn't like now where it's sort of a niche thing. Boxing was like number 1, 2 sport, horse racing, boxing.
Yes.
Were the biggest sports in the world and very primal, still is primal, but combat, that was like the thing. And so understanding the size, the scope of what all of that was is also a part of the story as well. Because if you get the idea of what boxing is now, even if you look at the fight of the century with Ali and Frazier in 71, that was huge, but nowhere near in comparison to Jeffries and Johnson and
with less technology,
with way less technology and way less, like you had to hear it either on the radio and whatever they could do with those films that they were making.
I wonder if it even was broadcast on radio back then, Ronnie, because we're talking about the early 1910s, and other. So you mentioned it in general, but God, Jack London, the great Call of the Wild writer, and was an asshole about this fight, and kind of helped guilt Jim Jeffries, who had been retired for 5 years. It's up to you, Jeff, for the white race to come back. What bullshit. And Jeffries had been, like I said, retired for 5 years, got himself in reasonable shape given he had been off in 5 years, and Johnson beat the hell out of him.
Let his brother get beaten up. First, threw him to slaughter, and then eventually mustered up the courage to take his shot. But I think he already knew what was coming.
Yeah. No, it's an amazing story. I got to acknowledge Nick Barucci joining us, everybody.
Hey, Nick C.
There you go.
Thank you, Nick.
Great person, hell of a writer, and
Yes.
one of the smartest writers in the industry today. And then
Thank
he always
you, Nick.
does this for me. He always says, everybody hit the thumbs up, and it helps my algorithm and my show. Thank you, Nick, for always thinking of me in that regard. I really appreciate it.
And I did not compliment Nick first to get Nick to compliment me. I complimented Nick legitimately. I had no idea that Nick was watching this. I was legitimately thanking Nick for.
We're big in the business, Rodney. You and I, we do our
Come
right,
on, man. We need to keep doing this. You know, we're conjuring up some folks right now. But yeah, I appreciate Nick and all of that. So yeah,
that's great, man. That's really great. All right, little fast before we wrap, a little modern boxing talk.
Yeah.
I don't know what I think of the British guy. Shame on me. Come on, John.
Anthony Joshua.
Anthony Joshua. Yeah, his upcoming fight.
It was a weird thing. It's a weird place for Anthony Joshua to be in. It's a weird. I say this. I never was sold on Anthony Joshua because the thing I saw with the Andy Ruiz fight is what I think. I hate to use the word exposed because any man that's willing to get in the ring and fight is putting his life in danger and could anything bag. So, just crapping on a guy because he has a bad outing or two, that's not what this is. I'm a fan. I couldn't do it. So obviously,
sure.
Let me say that first. I'm just saying from the sport aspect of it. I always looked at, and I listened to guys who have been around the business. I always listen to the trainers and stuff who do the blog sometimes and what they say. And they talk about how muscular he is and his ability to not only defend himself, but throw punches in a specific type of way that it almost short arms the punch in a way. And when you have to come back and do that it inhibits that because everything is so mechanical because you're so used to lifting weights and it shortens the muscle.
Yes.
And I may be getting all of that wrong, but that's what I took from it. And when I see guys who are natural fighters, who came up in the amateurs, who came up in have a different type of, their strength is connected to the ability to throw the punch and the ability to go through the skill set and fundamentals that come from it. The things that I learned when I take a boxing class, but will never know because I'm learning something that is not second nature to me. But the guys who are learning it since they were kids, I don't know if you can pick all of that up and have that physical disadvantage of not being able to develop the fast twitch muscles and all of that stuff. I look at a guy like Deontay Wilder. It was funny. Last name drop of the night. I remember I went to see the last Wilder fight when he
Wilder
fought
Fury. Oh no, excuse me, Robert Helenius.
Yes.
Go on, please.
I went to see that fight.
Okay.
So I was talking to another fight fan is Dave Chappelle.
Sure.
And I saw him at the Canelo fights because I went to the Canelo Golovkin fights.
Oh, that's great.
And some of the other fights, we'll be in the same area and we start talking boxing.
Sure.
And so I saw him, it was at a Robert Glasper concert. So we're backstage and we're talking and Robert Glasper scores winning time. So that's how I got tight with Robert Glasper, was a big fan of his beforehand. And so we talked boxing and I said, I don't know. I think, Wilder, I think Helenius, or however you say his name, is going to take him out because I've seen him fight before and he's a good fighter. And I always had a problem with Wilder because he's the wild punches. And what Fury did seemed to be the logical way to beat Deontay Wilder. If you could just be skilled, keep him at the end of the jab, eventually he's going to get tired. And if you can stay away from the right hand, time catches up with you and eventually you win. And so I made this prediction. I said, I don't think it's going to be, I think in the 5th or 6th, Helenius is going to get him. He's like, I don't know, that right hand. I was like, just trust me. I know my boxing. I watch Greg Haugen and all those guys.
Greg Haugen, yes.
I can go all the way back from
this
is personally, Tuesday night fights and this one. And we went through this before.
Yes.
So I've been as a child. I watched ABC fights, and
Come on.
I know this. There's no way, the skill set of always will defeat. Cut to round one. Hellenius is laying out of the ring, looking at me, and I'm looking at him, and we both got knocked out at the same time. And at that moment, I said to myself, I would never, ever, ever doubt the right hand of Deontay Wilder ever again. And it actually made me respect Tyson Fury that much more. And you think about how many times Tyson Fury got knocked down by Wilder, and he has like superior defense for a heavyweight. And,
oh my God. Yes.
And was knocked down, 700 times in those 3 fights? And it hit me at that moment, literally and figuratively, that this right hand is not something that can be toyed with, because I was going through like his resume, and other than King Kong, what's his name? Ortiz, that he knocked out twice.
Luis Ortiz, yes.
And there was I think Brazil and a couple of other guys. Most of the guys weren't like, it's not like we're in the day of Ken Norton and Ron Lyle and Ernie Shavers. And
Indeed.
It's not like Ali fought like the Avengers of boxers as a heavyweight, and guys who were legendary in their own right. And you got a Joe Frazier, and you got a this one, and you got a Larry Holmes, even though Larry won, but we know that was a different dynamic. But look at the guys that he was fighting. So I'm putting up against and saying these guys were good fighters, but they weren't the caliber of fighter that had all of the requisite skill sets to challenge Wilder's issues.
Indeed.
Every time he got hit with a good shot, like a good shot, he would revert back into being that guy who would just throw wild punches. And if he connected with one, he could kill you and generations of your family. But more often than not, if you got a skilled guy like an Andy Ruiz, that guy is going to be able to, compensate for that, because he's expecting it. And he's learned his whole life how to do it. So I know Ruiz and Wilder are supposed to fight, but I will never doubt it will, because even Ruiz got caught a couple of times against what's his name? The other the guy he fought before he fought Ortiz.
Damn it,
you know what I'm talking about. You know what I'm talking about. And he's a contender. Yeah. He's a tough out.
Shame on us.
He lost a lot of weight. He did.
Chris Arreola.
There we go. And that was a good fight. Like Arreola had him in trouble.
Surprisingly good fight, because you're right. Arreola had seen his best days, but he was on the other side of his
career, and now he was able to still give Ruiz a test, and Ortiz gave him a test too. But I'm thinking, I will never doubt Deontay Wilder's right hand. That was the big mistake of my life, and I will never bet against his right hand, regardless of who he's fighting. If he fights Tyson Fury again, I won't bet at all. And I just hope for a great fight, because his right hand is incredible, and I think he'll be able to throw it until he's 50. He's got that kind of body. He'll never be fat, and he just hits you and you go out.
Well, I agree with Matthew.
I agree with Matthew too.
Wilder's right hand is Hellboy's fist of doom, and yes, it is a one-punch train stopping,
and know it's coming. You know it's coming. That's like there's nothing else that's coming. Y'all would think, because logically, I just kept, when Hellenius was fighting, let's stay away from right hand. I'm yelling this like no one else told him this in training. Like I'm the only one that knows. Stay away from right hand. Stay away from the right hand. Cut to right hand, and you see it coming. He holds it out there, like. I got it cocked, and I know you're coming, and he just hits you. It's like he doesn't even like hide it behind the jab sometimes. He just throws it.
Because he, respectfully, Rodney, and respectfully, Deontay, he doesn't know how to jab. He is not a complete fighter.
No, he had a good jab in that last Fury fight. He was jabbing to the body the first 2 rounds, and then he let it go. Then he just abandoned it and went back to being Deontay.
Any fighter who, if you back them up, they go instinctual. And sadly, as you said earlier, it's muscle memory that the guys who have been fighting since they were little kids, like an Andy Ruiz, are able to weather a storm and come back with a plan. Wilder has the right hand. He doesn't have any other plans. It is a showstopper and always
But it
will
works.
be, and it does work, and that's why he'll always be a gate attraction and worthy of the gate and the excitement that he brings. But you're right. I also agree with you. The level of contenders that he fought, yeah, he was undefeated until Fury, but the reality was they weren't the greatest
They
heavyweight
weren't the
contenders.
great guys, and it's
They were
like
the only guys out there. And thankfully, with Ruiz, with Ortiz, some of these
Now,
other guys,
and even if he
got
fights
about 5 or
Joshua,
6. Yeah, we got about 5 or 6 good heavyweights. I mean, I think this is the best the division has been since the early 90s, or maybe
that guy
the late
Joe
80s.
Joyce, that guy Joe
Joyce is. I agree with you, man.
They're like 4 or 5 guys.
Joe Parker even is still.
Yeah,
a
it's a guy with top rank too that was on the same card with Wilder. That's a heavyweight that knocked a guy out. Really fast guy, really fast guy. I don't remember his name. He's got one of them nicknames.
Well, and the guy that Joshua's fighting is at least untested, and it'll be interesting to see what happens when he fights Joshua.
Yeah, but if they were talking about Wilder fighting Joshua, he'd knock the British out of Anthony Joshua.
I agree with
Joshua
you.
would sound like he comes from the south side of Detroit if he ever fights Wilder. Because
it's the chin. He's got a suspect chin. I mean, and I love Alexander Usyk is like when Holyfield came to the heavyweights, where don't take this guy for granted because he's got great skill.
He's scrappy. Scrappy. I still think Tyson's going to get him, though. I think if they fight,
he's too big. He's too big. Yeah. And also, and maybe we've said this before, Rodney, he's a building. It's like fighting a building, and he'll just lean on you and sap your strength by leaning on a guy. Yeah. I mean, I'll give you another guy that, and actually I think gave Tyson Fury everything he could handle. Otto Wallin.
Yes,
European.
He cut him. Cut both eyes.
Eyes. And I think everybody's scared to death of him, frankly.
Yeah.
Because of what he did.
But my thing with Tyson is, his ability. Floyd Mayweather has it. Some other guys have it. No matter what they're under, whatever firefight, no matter how much the pressure is getting on in the ring, they still can relax. Like it's still like they never lose themselves in the madness of the moment. And I admire that so much because if 2 phone calls come through at the same time while I'm talking, I panic. But to be in a fight with millions of people watching you and you're hurt, the Shane Mosley fight with Floyd was an example of that. Shane hit him twice with 2 knockout caliber. Like a lot of guys could have panicked. I saw Victor Ortiz do that with that Mayweather fight. Similar thing, where it's almost like, all right, this is too much for me psychologically. I can't say that for sure because I'm not in his head. But it seemed like whenever he got to a place where it was too much, it became too much. And when Shane hit Floyd and Floyd was in trouble and wobbling around, instinctually within the next 20 seconds, he was not only back in the fight, but may have won the round. And it was all because he knew how to, when this happens, this is what I do. And Tyson Fury, to me, has that thing too, because he was out in that 12th round. A lot of guys would have laid down. The guy that just fought Tank Davis that said he was blind after Tank hit him in the forehead, but he wasn't blind during the interview. It was like a temporary blindness. I think it was a similar thing. He knew what was coming from Tank and did not want to feel that anymore. It's just this thing, I think, and it's the beauty to me of combat sports. Oftentimes, it's who psychologically is the toughest, not necessarily who's the strongest 100%. Or who has the best, whatever, but who has the best mind. And I'm always intrigued by people who are able to, just control that thing under duress, because I struggle to do it, but I admire people who can.
I had the opportunity back in the 90s to interview Floyd Patterson. And I asked him about the second time he fought Ali. And man, thank God for YouTube, because all this stuff is there. And if you miss Don Dunphy and Howard Cosell calling great fights, and Ken Norton, by the way, doing exceptional color commentary on a lot of fights, they're all there. And I asked Floyd about that second fight, 72 or so or 3 with Ali. And he said, I saw openings, and mentally I saw them, could not get my body to react and follow up. And that's when I knew, and that was his last fight. He's like, that's when I knew I had to quit. And I mean, because he had, after losing the title, he had some great fights with guys like Jimmy Ellis and George Chuvalo and others that were terrific fights, Patterson. But yeah, and that's why I think of guys like Anthony Joshua that came to boxing in a secondary nature from their original sports, even Deontay too. And I think that's what's missing, like we said earlier, that instinctual muscle memory of having done it since you were a little kid, that you can rely when your brain shuts off and you are hurt, that you can rely on instincts and get out of trouble and stuff. I think that's important. And I think it's the difference. Like you said, it's the mental game that really does make the difference in a lot of fighters too. Any thoughts on Crawford and Spence? I don't know if we're ever going to get it, but
I don't know if we're ever going to get it. I think it's intriguing because we've seen both guys against Ugas. Spence looked like he was shaken up for a hot second there. And I don't know if we've tested Spence. I love Errol Spence, in fact, but I love the way he breaks a guy down. But since that car accident, we haven't really seen him tested. Ugas is a good fighter, and who he beat before?
Sean Porter?
No, in between Danny.
Oh shoot!
Danny
Garcia? I think it's Danny Garcia.
Good fighters, really good fighters, but not killers. And it's the same thing we're talking about right now, where what happens when you have to dig into that next. You got to upshift to that next gear. Is he affected by any of that? I hope not, because I really love him as a fighter. Terrence Crawford, the thing with Terrence Crawford, Garcia, the thing that scares me with Terrence Crawford is, even though he's incredibly skilled, he still relies on his physical gifts, the speed and the movement and all of that. And I think he's 35. And if we keep pushing this back to, even though he's winning, time is undefeated. And do you get the same guy at 37 and 39 that you got when he was 33 and 30?
Especially at that weight class too.
And they're talking about moving to 154 and Spence maybe fighting Charlo and some of this other stuff.
Intriguing.
It is intriguing,
I like Charlos,
But I look at, like with Mikey Garcia, when Spence fought him and shut him out, there's a limit to how much you can. Now, I understand when we're talking about gaining those pounds, it's different than me gaining 5 pounds. I gain 5 pounds. It's just.
Well, the guys in the higher weight class, my friend Harold Brazier told me this back in the early 90s, because he was struggling to still make 140. And I'm like, Harold, it's 7 pounds. Go up to 147. And he's like, are you nuts? He goes, guys that fight at 147 walk around at 160. And they bring that 160 power down to 147. He's like, that hurts a lot more, John. I'm not interested. So I got it. And Harold knew. So I'm like, all right, I take your word.
And being able to take that punch when you're accustomed to taking a 147 punch, even if you're sparring guys that are bigger, it's a different thing altogether. And so I remember I had a guy, I won't say his name. He's a popular trainer in Hollywood. And I was boxing. This is one of those periods. I go through these periods where I box for exercise.
Good for you, man.
And because it's fun. Anytime you hit something, it doesn't feel like exercise. It feels like it's cathartic in a way. I want to hit a lot of
man.
And so you get into this thing where when someone's holding the mitts, that if they do it well enough and you get your timing down, you start to think like, I could do this for real. And so this gentleman was holding the mitts, and we getting to the point where pop, and I'm going under. We're doing the whole thing. It's not Floyd Mayweather, but it's Floyd Mayweather adjacent. I'm getting close.
You got a rhythm going. I'm with you.
Yeah, I'm doing good. I just say I'm doing good. To the point where, and this is like 2 weeks in a row now, I'm getting to the point I'm going every other day, and this is good. And he's encouraging me, because that's what you're supposed to do to keep getting the money. You're supposed to make me believe I'm actually doing something. And so at a certain point, I start like slipping a couple in, just a little bit, just to play. We're playing. There's a couple of shots to the ribs, a little bit to the belly. And he said, "Oh, you ready to spar?" And this is a guy, he must weigh maybe 147, 154,
Okay.
and I'm the size of a building.
I'm happy.
And I'm not afraid of you, normal sized person. Do you see how big I am? Let's come on. I'm ready to spar 4 rounds. Okay, 4 rounds. But I can spar 4 rounds. It's 3 minutes. You know, I'm in the gym with you for an hour. Surely I could do this thing. This is simple. He jumps out of the ring and takes off his mitts and puts on gloves. And he's like ready. Like he's been waiting for this moment to just embarrass. And he has like women in the class, like doing the exercise and the calisthenics. And he's talking loud enough that the women stop doing the calisthenics. They want to see him like, this is our teacher. They want to see the teacher, fight this huge guy like Godzilla. So he climbs back in the ring. Ding, ding. He has the bell. We start moving around. I'm doing the George Foreman and I'm doing everything I've ever seen on television. This is my moment now of reality. And he positions his body in such a way that it's not, if this was normal, he's this way. So I can't hit anything. And I'm trying. And I'm getting tired. We have been at this for like 4 seconds. We've been doing this and I'm tired already. It's not like hitting the mitts where I can stand there and just hit the mitts. And I see him enjoying it. I've seen people happy before, and I see this look on his face, like this something is coming. And he lets me get through the first round of me swinging mindlessly and awkwardly. And ding, ding. I go over to the corner. Want some water? Yeah, I'm going to drink a little bit of water and whatever. All right, we're back at it. Round 2. He opens up and starts to punch me like a man. Like with no, I'm a writer, I'm a writer. I'm not this, I have the size of a person who's physical. And if you're threatening my children, I'm sure I could defend them enough that they could make it back to the car. But I would have to pick up a brick or something. I would have to do something. And he started to punch me a lot, not in the head, but just here, just and I'm swinging. I don't know how to deal with this emotionally. There's nothing. I'm not prepared for this. I'm here for exercise. And that part of my mind that's like, why did you do this other thing? Like the logic is coming back now. Why are you doing this thing? Ding, ding, the second round. I'm like, all right. I don't know if I'm going to make this 4 rounds. We get to the third round. Midway through the third, I stop. He said, oh, you going to just jump out of my ring and disrespect my ring? Yes, sir, I am. I never went back. I didn't even I drove home with my gloves on. And I took off my shirt, and the top of my chest had these little bruises from where he was hitting me as a reminder. From that point on, whenever I've gone to a boxing class or a trainer, I'm incredibly disciplined. I don't do anything other than what I'm told, regardless of what he's charging me. Stay in my lane. Stay right where I'm supposed to be. But I learned in that moment, and I actually understood boxing a lot more after getting beaten. Just getting beaten and humiliated. It was almost like my professional wrestling. That's another story for another day. But I had a period where I was a professional wrestler for a weekend, and it was a similar thing. It was a similar humiliation of me. I've been humbled in life several times.
Well, hearing your story and reading the anecdotes of Norman Mailer and George Plimpton when they've stepped in the ring with guys.
Yeah, paper tiger. I was a paper tiger in that moment.
Yeah. Plimpton, for people who don't know, got in the ring with Archie Moore, and even and it was it was sparring, but Plimpton obviously got his ass handed to him.
Getting punched is a different thing altogether. I'm not talking about a street fight. Street fight is a street fight. Usually a street fight has some passion underneath them. You're not just fighting to fight. Fight because somebody pinched somebody or somebody said something or whatever. Yeah. So there's the emotion of the moment that's fueling the conflict. But to do it as a form of exercise and sport, that's something that's different. And I'm built to write stories. I write about monsters and vampires, and I keep one in the chamber, like I said, to protect my kids. But I'm holding it dear, and it's fading. It's like the I can't use the analogy that I was going to use, but it's like putting something in your wallet and thinking that it can last forever. And that's what that fight is at that point for me. Like, I don't know how much longer this is going to be, but I just have to get a gun. But yeah.
All right, two last things. One
Yes.
boxing thing and one more you. Jirov and Better Biev, I think, are amazing fighters. I don't know when we'll see that fight, and certainly Better Biev is still great, but we're starting to see age kind of.
That Caleb Plant fight was a lot more competitive than I thought it would be. But Jirov has the perfect style for Canelo. I don't know if he has the perfect style that's universal. Doesn't translate to everybody. It's
Fair
like
enough.
Canelo overwhelms you. Like Canelo wears you down. If I can't wear you down, what do I do? It's like I don't know what I'm intrigued to see the rematch that everybody thinks he'll lose, because in watching Canelo, I think he's gotten better defensively since he fought Floyd. But his methodology still seems to be the same of I'm just going to beat the hell out of you. I'm just going to get you. Whatever you have to throw at me, I'll take. And eventually I'm going to wear you down with pressure.
Indeed.
And it caught up to Golovkin because Golovkin's 74. And, and so it caught up to most everybody else. Floyd was able to avoid all of it because he's smart.
Right.
I have to take this call.
Rodney, please. Did you want to wrap? Because I'd be happy to.
Hold on 1 second.
Okay, no problem. Do your thing.
Can I call you back in 1 second? Can I call you back in 1 second? All right, call you right back. All right. No, all right, I'm good.
All good, man. No, sorry to keep you. Yes.
No, we're good. But yeah, I think that's basically that fight, and I'd love to see it happen, but I don't know. It's intriguing because I don't know who Jirov is, other than what I've seen. I haven't seen him fight enough to be able to give an informed thing. I've only seen 2 fights, and the second one was when he beat up Canelo.
When he was fighting as an up and comer on HBO, I was paying attention to him.
And I wasn't paying attention.
Okay, yeah. And I think he does have skill, and it's a question of, as you say, how much pressure can Better Biev take, and can Jirov avoid the traps that Better Biev can set up and potentially hurt like he did in the last fight. No, I hear what you're saying. The last thing I wanted to tell you was, first of all, I loved when you were doing the after show for Winning Time, both the video and the podcast. And I know now you've been doing a podcast as well, and you're talking to comic creators.
Yeah. Well, that's a separate one. I'm doing a horror podcast called Run Fool. You got to say it like that. With horror stories over the century, the first 2 centuries in America.
That's great. I didn't know about that one. That's great.
That's the one that they announced. I did one. I was doing one to promote the book and talking to different comic creators. But we won a Signal Award for the Winning Time one. I'm very, very proud of that. For the Winning Time.
Fantastic.
Podcast.
Hey, it was good.
And that was sort of what opened up the door to looking at podcasts in a different light, because I did enjoy it. People seem to enjoy it as well. And so why not jump into the fray and do something about subjects that I'm kind of dig.
That's great, man. No, I'm glad you're good at it. And I'm glad, like I said, I know about the comic book one. I did not know. And what is that? What is the comic book one called?
The comic book one was just comic conversations, and they would focus on the con part. Like I don't know if I'm a con man or whether it was like comic conventions, but focus on like the con and convention and conversation. It was okay. I didn't come up with that one. I came up with Run Fool.
I like Run Fool.
Come up with that one. Yeah, Run Fool. But you got to say it like Run Fool. You got to say it like that. Yeah. You got to say it like a black sitcom.
I was going to say, I don't want to appropriate it.
You got to say it like, Dynamite. You got to say it like that. You got to say it with some
I'll say like Run Fool. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and then they're like, what's that? Wait a minute. I don't know what that means. Maybe I should stay. But if you say Run Fool, then it's like, oh, shit, what's happening?
Well, I'm going to listen to that. That's great. Rodney, you've been really generous with your time. I thank you so much. And remind everybody that,
thank everybody for listening.
Absolutely.
Gail,
watching.
Nick,
Gail, Nick, absolutely. Blacula out now. Philadelphia out now. Monarch out now. We got more stuff coming up with the Nightmare blog, and
the Mandalorian.
Mandalorian, of course. Yes,
you got all kinds of stuff coming.
You're killing it, man.
I can't talk about it. I'm doing something. I'm trying to go out with a bang of glory. I'm trying to go out with some work, some positive things.
People, I guess people are demanding that we talk again soon so that I can get the wrestling story from you.
Oh, you want the wrestling story? WCW. Yeah, man. That's a story.
Well, we'll give it to you next. We can do it next.
Worse than boxing. Yeah, that'll be the next one. Worse than boxing. This one.
We'll hear about it next time.
I actually started crying on this one. Like personally, I just let me go home, please. So yes, that was There's another humiliating moment in the life of Rodney Park. I'm gonna do my own roast where I just tell stories about myself where I failed in life. I'm just gonna do that.
Well, the successes are outweighing the bad experiences, in my opinion. So
I appreciate it.
And I know I'm not alone. Seriously, Rodney, I really mean it. Every time you come back, I know we're going to have a good time. And tonight was no exception. So
I look forward to the next one. You're welcome.
Me too, man. Everybody, thanks a lot for watching. It's going to be a great week here on Word Balloon Live. Until next time, everybody stay safe, stay happy, stay healthy.